What is the history of the Olympic Games? When and why did they start? Why did they disappear in the 4th century AD? And when and why did they make a comeback in their modern form? Why are they even called the Olympics? And what's the meaning behind the famous 5 Olympic rings? This is History Calling, where I bring you new videos every week on all aspects of the past. And today, in honour of the 2024 Paris Olympics, I give you a brief history of the most famous sporting event in the world. Make sure you stay till the end, and I'll even share some Guinness World Records set by the Games and their competitors. Before I jump in, if you love history and want to get more delivered right to you, hit that subscribe button and switch on the notification bell, and YouTube will let you know every time I upload. You can also find me on Patreon, where I share bonus content every week, and it's linked below for you, as is my Instagram account. The origins of the ancient Olympic Games are obscure. The earliest source we have, which references them, dates to 776 BC, but they may well have existed before that. There are various stories about how they began, but one of the most famous comes from the poet Pindar, who attributed them to the hero Hercules, aka Hercules. Hercules supposedly established them in honour of his father Zeus, and ordered that they be held every 4 years as part of a religious festival. They were held in the sanctuary of Zeus in Olympia, Greece, and this is where their name comes from. Initially lasting 1 day, they were expanded to 4 days in 684 BC, then later 5, and events included sprints, long jumps, javelin throwing, shot put throwing, boxing, and wrestling. They were called the Olympiagones, and I had to get that pronunciation off Google Translate, so I apologise to all the Greeks in the world if I got that terribly wrong, which means Olympic pains. Think of the English word agony. But the name has now been updated so that they are called Games, though I'm sure many athletes can identify with the idea of them being physically painful on occasion. Even if we only count their existence from 776 BC, the Games continue to be held for at least 1169 years. One theory as to how and why they ceased is that they were abolished by the Roman Emperor Theodosius I in 393 AD, because he viewed them as encouraging paganism. Other scholars have argued that they ended under Theodosius II in 420 or 435 though, because a fire burnt down the temple of Olympian Zeus, and archaeological evidence does seem to support the idea that 393 was not the final year in which they were held. As with so much of ancient history though, solid answers to these questions are elusive. And as author Sophie Remizen wrote in her 2015 book, The End of Greek Athletics in Late Antiquity, the evidence is scant and, quote, whatever happened, we are unlikely to find it documented in any great detail. That book is linked below for you, along with another about the history of the Olympics. If you'd like a free download telling you what to look for in history books to decide if they're worth buying or reading, head on over to my website, historycallingofficial.com, and sign up to my mailing list to get it. There were attempts in the 18th and 19th centuries to reintroduce some form of Olympic Games in various countries, including in the borough of Wenlock in Shropshire, England, starting in 1850 and thanks to the efforts of a Dr. W.P. Brookes. The Wenlock Olympian Games have continued to this day, admittedly with some breaks in their history, and they are part of the reason that the modern worldwide Olympics now exist. This is because in 1890, Baron Pierre de Coubertin visited the Wenlock Olympian Society and was inspired to refound the Games as a truly international competition, though he would later try to airbrush out Brookes' input and importance to the whole idea. He organised the first Olympic Congress, which hosted a round of games in the Grand Amphitheatre at Sorbonne University between the 16th and 23rd of June 1894. Compared to more recent events, they were modest. Just 2,000 people attended, only 24 sports were played, and only 10 countries were represented. To put that in context for you, the Paris 2024 Olympics boasts 329 events and 32 sports, with over 200 countries represented by 10,500 athletes. Still, these 1896 Games were a success and led to the creation of the International Olympic Committee, which has existed to organise and manage the Games ever since. The first official Olympic Games of the modern era took place in Athens in April 1896. They have continued almost without interruption ever since, though they had to be cancelled in 1916 due to World War I, and again in 1940 and 1944 due to World War II. The 1948 Games were then called the Games of Renewal. They also had to be postponed in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic and were held in Tokyo the following year. Starting in 1994, the Games were split into summer and winter events, held 2 years apart from one another, so that Olympic events now occur biannually. The first Paralympics were held in Rome in 1960. In 1896, the new Games were restricted to men only, but starting with the second Games, held in Paris in 1900, women were allowed to compete, though only 22 of the 997 athletes at that competition were female, and they only competed in tennis, sailing, croquet, golf, and equestrian events. Women's participation has slowly increased, though. It stood at 13% of the athletes present in Tokyo in 1964, 23% in LA in 1984, 45% in Rio in 2016, and about 48.9% in the 2020/21 Games, which, as I've mentioned, were again in Tokyo. As well as the gender makeup of the Games, many other changes have also occurred over the years. The opening ceremony, in which athletes parade into the stadium, began in 1906. Then, in 1913, the famous Olympic rings, used to symbolise the Games, were created by Pierre de Coubertin. These are 5 equally sized circles, interlinked, with 3 on top and 2 on the bottom, and traditionally in the colours blue, yellow, black, green and red on a white background, though they are sometimes seen in just one of these colours or even in monochrome. The Olympic Charter explains their meaning, saying, "The Olympic symbol expresses the activity of the Olympic movement and represents the union of the 5 continents and the meeting of athletes from throughout the world at the Olympic Games." As there are actually 7 continents in the world, you may be interested to know that the 2 Americas are represented by 1 ring, while Antarctica, which has no native human population, is omitted. No specific ring colour is associated with any particular continent, despite what some people may say, but these 5, in combination with the white background, can represent the colour palette of any world flag. Other changes, which we now take for granted, are the use of gold, silver and bronze medals, which only started in 1904, and the existence of an Olympic village to house all the competitors and other members of the various countries' delegations. This began with the Paris Games of 1924 and has continued ever since. The Olympic flame relay, whereby a torch is lit in Greece several months before the Games and then slowly transported to the host country for inclusion in the opening ceremony, was introduced in the 1936 Berlin Games. Although the Olympics are meant to transcend politics, in reality they can be heavily affected by it, and the Games have suffered many controversies and tragedies, only some of which I can discuss here to give you some examples of the kinds of problems they can encounter. The 1936 Berlin Games were known as the Nazi Olympics because Hitler and his cronies tried to use them to promote their racist agenda. Though I really love the fact that the black American sprinter and long jumper Jesse Owens won 4 golds, which really stuck it to the Nazis and all their dipstick ideas about people being special or not just on the basis of ethnic background. Germany and Japan were not invited to the 1948 London Games due to lingering hostility after World War II, and numerous countries boycotted the 1956 Melbourne Olympics either because of the Suez Canal crisis, the Soviet Union's invasion of Hungary, or, in the case of China, because Taiwan was being allowed to compete under the name Formosa. In Mexico in 1968, American sprinters Tommy Smith and John Carlos protested against how black people in America were being treated by standing on the podium barefoot with their heads bowed and one gloved hand in the air. They were then banned from the Games by the IOC and US Olympic Committee. One of the most tragic incidents occurred during the 1972 Games when 8 members of the Palestinian terrorist organisation Black September killed 2 members of the Israeli team and took 9 others hostage who also ultimately died. This incident quickly became known as the Munich Massacre. There was another mass boycott of the 1980 Moscow Games when the US led the way in refusing to send their athletes because of the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. Only 80 countries participated in that year, which was way down on the 121 who had participated in 1972. The 1980 Games were also dogged by accusations of doping amongst many of the athletes and by claims that the Russian officials were cheating in how they marked events in order to give their competitors an unfair advantage. There have been numerous allegations of doping or cheating in one way or another at other games too, but they are too numerous to list here. Russia often features in such scandals though, most notably in 2016 when 111 of its athletes were not accepted at the Games in Rio because of a widespread doping scandal. The 1994 Winter Olympics were also rocked by scandal, this time involving the US figure skaters Tonya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan, when Harding's ex-husband arranged to have Kerrigan attacked a few weeks before the Games and her knee injured. Harding was subsequently handed a lifetime ban on competing or coaching, and a movie about her life and the incident was released in 2017 starring Margot Robbie. In 1996 in Atlanta, Georgia, the Centennial Olympic Park bombing occurred, killing 1 and injuring 111. The perpetrator was terrorist and serial bomber Eric Rudolph. So that gives you an idea of the issues that the Games can and have faced. But to finish, let's look at something more upbeat and consider just a few of the world records set at the modern Olympic Games according to the Guinness World Records site. The first modern Olympic champion was James Connolly from the USA, who won the hop, skip and jump competition in 1896. Don't you just love that hop, skip and jump was an Olympic sport? The first female to win an Olympic event was the Swiss woman Hélène Duportelet, who won the 1-2-ton sailing event on the 22nd of May 1900, alongside her husband and son, and I'm afraid I don't know what the 1-2-ton sailing event entailed exactly. The first woman to win a singles event was Charlotte Cooper from the United Kingdom, who won the Women's Tennis Award on the 11th of July that same year. The oldest male Olympic medalist was Oskar Swan from Sweden, who won silver at the age of 72 in 1920 as a member of the men's 100-metre running deer shooting team. The oldest Olympic gold female medalist was American Eliza Pollock for archery in 1904 when she was 63. The most Olympic medals won by a man is 28, and they were awarded to swimmer Michael Phelps from the USA during the 2004, 2008, 2012 and 2016 Games. The most medals won by a woman is 18, going to Soviet gymnast Larissa Semyonovna Latinina between 1956 and 1964. The first televised Olympics were the 1936 Berlin Games. Finally, because I just found this record to be quite funny as I would never think of putting this into the Guinness World Records, the highest grossing movie about the Olympics is Blades of Glory, which I love by the way because it's so funny. Released in 2007, it had grossed $146 million, £79 million worldwide by the 12th of July that year. I've linked it below for you if you want to check it out, and there's also a link for an Amazon Prime free trial, though do check the terms and conditions on that if you're not sure about it. I suspect you can only use it if you've never used it before, for instance. If you'd like to know more incredible facts and records about the Olympics, you can head over to the Guinness World Records website too. If you just run a search on the word Olympics, you'll get well over 1,000 hits. Question of the day. What's your favourite part of the Olympics? Is it a particular sport? Is it the grand opening and closing ceremonies? Or is it when it's all over and the world stops being sports mad and goes back to normal? Let me know below, and for more ancient history, try one of these videos next. Whatever you choose, please enjoy, and until next time, keep learning.